This is a book summary of The Absorbent Mind, written and read by myself, Benjamin Lee Harrington. The original book was authored by Dr. Maria Montessori and published by Montessori Pearson in 1949. Summary begins. There are moments in our lives that have critical importance in regards to learning certain skills, and if that moment is missed, the full mastery of those skills can evade us forever, or at the very least become infinitely more difficult to obtain. Language is a prime example. Several extreme and very moving cases have shown us over time that if, as a baby and child, a human is entirely deprived of exposure to any language, the later adult will only be able to acquire the very lowest level of ability in language. Only with enormous effort and support can basic sentence formation be achieved. Whilst flowing conversation, that will be an eternal impossibility. And what about under more normal circumstance, such as yourself, someone who spent their early years in and around language? Have you ever then tried to learn another language in your adult years? If so, how was the experience? How did you do at learning that language? Be honest, did you give up? If not, how far have you got? And the key question though, would the native people of that country's language recognise you as a foreigner? Most probably the answer is yes, they would. And it's nothing to be ashamed of, because perfecting a new language as an adult is not just difficult, it's almost biologically impossible. But this is not the case for the early years child in the everyday world. A newborn in the space of only 3 years will have grasped a vast understanding of his native language, and by 6 years of age will have mastered this language in all of its intricacy, effectively becoming one of his people. What's more, that child's conquest of language is entirely effortless. So what's the difference then between the adult and the child? Between you, with your wealth of life and learning experience already under your belt, and this small being delivered into the world psychologically empty and physically helpless? The answer to that question lies in the title of this book. The Absorbent Mind was written by Dr. Maria Montessori following historic lectures she had delivered in the latter stages of her life, building on decades of incredible achievement, groundbreaking discoveries, and, most importantly, extensive direct observation of children from all over the world. This book provides a deep introduction into her methodology and reasoning around the Montessori method, and at the very centre of this methodology and reasoning is the absorbent mind, a term created by Montessori to encapsulate the incredible characteristics of every human mind, specifically during the first 6 years of life. During this window of time, our minds have a unique, powerful, and time-sensitive ability to very literally absorb the world around us. From 0 to 6, we possess a mind that learned in an entirely different manner. It's a mind completely blank and hungry for experience, specifically direct sensory experience, which feeds information to a superior form of memory, able to absorb, process and store every tiny sensory detail of every single moment. It's the full spectrum of this sensory experience feeding the absorbent mind that shapes our psychological, emotional and physical development. The absorbent mind, with its unique, powerful and time-sensitive abilities, literally builds the blueprint of who we are and the underlying person we will be for our entire life. So it's probably fair to say it holds a degree of importance. Human development during the first 6-year chapter of life is rapid and incredible, and Montessori likens it to the majesty of embryology, that branch of science which studies the prenatal world of embryos and fetal development. So let's look briefly at this comparison because it's very, very powerful. Nature's embryonic process begins with a single simple germinal sex cell. This single cell then splits into 2 complete cells, effectively doubling itself. These 2 cells then double again, and then again and again, on and on, doubling and multiplying. This exponential multiplication is formulaic and leads to ever-growing communities of entirely different cells, each designed with stunning variety and precision to function within and as part of a different organ. Each organ built with these customized cells, be it the liver, skin, eye, brain, etc., will then, for its entire life, play a specific and set role in the body's ecosystem. And so, as a result of this incredible embryonic process, an infinitely complex living body that was previously non-existent has come into physical form. So how does this relate to the absorbent mind? Well, it's similar in that when this baby body arrives into the world, its mind is entirely empty. Psychologically speaking, there's nothing. But with the baby's first breath, we have the germinal cell of psychological development, and from there on, a similar journey of exponential formation has begun. Only instead of cell replication, it's neural connections. And just in the same way that cell replication leads to the creation of physical organs, according to Montessori, the development of the brain during baby and childhood creates psychological organs. These psychological organs include all of our mental characteristics, from language understanding to cognitive reasoning, from spatial awareness to movement control, from social response to character development. And just like the creation of physical organs when a baby is growing inside its mother's womb, there is a time-sensitive factor. Once these psychological organs of the mind are formed, they are fixed for life. And so, as a result of the absorbent mind, a conscious and complex personality that did not exist has come into psychological being. This is why, as adults, we can no longer learn a language in all its perfection. Our time-sensitive period of language learning has passed and will never return. The language organ within our brain has already been formed and shaped for life. It can only be slightly tweaked, just like a physical organ which cannot change form. It can only be maintained, damaged or repaired. Critical quotation. The child's impressions are so profound that a biological or psychochemical change takes place, by which his mind ends by resembling the environment itself. Children become like the things they love. In every type of life, it has been discovered that this power exists of absorbing the environment and coming to resemble it. The child builds his inmost self out of the deeply felt impressions he receives, and this especially in the first part of his life. It is in babyhood, by means of his infantile powers alone, that the child acquires personal characteristics that will mark him forever. Those of his language, his religion, his race, and so on. This is his way of adapting to the world in which he finds himself. End of quotation. As a result of their absorbent mind, the baby and early years child is a wholly different being to us as adults. On a daily basis, this essentially acts as a barrier to understanding and empathy between adult and child, and vice versa. And this is where Montessori's discoveries come to the fore. In following the path of natural development that the mind of every human baby undertakes from birth until 6, Dr. Montessori constructs a wealth of material that shapes her unique educational philosophy, and with it, paves the way for a considered approach for teachers and parents to follow. This path is constructed over 4 quote-unquote planes of development, each being 6 years in duration. Together, these 4 planes of development then follow the journey from birth to 24 years of age. Montessori's first plane of development is the 6-year period of the absorbent mind, and because of the huge implications and changes within that first plane, she splits it into 2 equal periods, or 2 subplanes, years 0 to 3 and years 3 to 6. 0 to 3 is the subplane of transformation, from life in the womb to life in the real world. Having been pushed out into this world, psychologically empty and physically helpless, the complex mind and body of baby and toddler continues to form, develop and strengthen progressively over the first 36 months of life. This is a phase of what Montessori calls the unconscious creator, where a human is continuing to be formed without knowledge or awareness that development is actually happening. 0 to 3 is a period of intense sensitivity and crucial importance with regards to the formation of a child's psychological organs, which we covered previously. The following subplane, years 3 to 6, then sees the use and development of these now formed parts in order to produce a unified, complete and conscious little being. The child is expanding and perfecting his development, crystallizing all the internal work that has gone on before. The absorbent mind is now fully conscious and eager to work in the external world so the child can build himself. This is clearly visible in the 3 to 6-year-old who has an insatiable hunger to explore the world and sometimes, quite tiringly, the unending energy with which to do so. As with everything defining a growing human's experience, there is a constructive approach to these two parts, these two subplanes of development, in that the first acts as a foundation for the second. A more stable and complete prior stage permits a richer and more productive following stage. This constructive approach continues, building consecutively and progressively throughout childhood and on into adolescence and early adulthood. But the most important and impactful period is the first 6 years of life, that period of the absorbent mind. So, how does this all implicate adult carers around growing children? Well, within the Montessori method, keen observation of this constructive process across the planes is a vital and fundamental responsibility of both parents and teachers. Observation allows us to tap into the natural development of the child, who is a quote-unquote natural learner and a natural cooperator. And within and across these 2 3-year chapters, those 2 subplanes, there are 2 easily observable developments that are as incredible as they are important. They are language and movement. Let's cover language first. Montessori refers to language as the instrument of collective thought and a kind of superintelligence. Observation and reasoning tell us that a newborn baby arrives into this world with an internal programming or even predisposition to tune into the human voice. For no other sound do children come to replicate with such precision and grace. They can't replicate a bird's song or the sound of water running. But any human language and its finest, most delicate sounds can be replicated to perfection. And the language learning process begins almost from the beginning, when a prenatal baby has the ability to hear from inside the womb. After birth, at around 4 months, a baby comes to understand that this music to his ears is emanating from the mouths of those people around him. And from this point onwards, a baby will show great interest in the movement of those mouths he sees, working internally to great extent via his absorbent mind to replicate those mouth movements, effectively beginning his journey to obtaining full reign upon language. A small baby paying close attention to the movements of a speaking mouth is a great example of an observational opportunity. And as Montessori highlights, this is something that many adults might normally miss. And until this final destination of complete speech is reached, parents and teachers must consider the possible role of communication frustrations in any behavioural deviation. As much as possible, we must work to become interpreters for the child. According to Montessori, this ability to continually empathise and interpret as much as anything else is a golden path to gaining a child's love and respect. With regards to movement, Montessori believes it is largely misunderstood and demands a great deal more respect than traditional education gives it. In context of the absorbent mind, movement represents everything from the tiniest, most intricate workings of the tongue to form an exact sound or tone specific to any language, all the way to grasping and gross motor activities such as lifting, running and jumping. Movement is the outer delivery from a united internal effort by the brain, senses and muscles, and action is the end result, a gift that permits expression of the inquisitive and creative human spirit. Movement and action allow a child to do his everyday work of feeding his own absorbent mind with experience. And from around 1 year old, with the onset of ever-increasing strength, mobility and coordination, movement and action allow a child to challenge and develop himself physically too. In the process of all this exploration and activity, movement and action are playing a vital role in the healthy formation of those internal psychological organs. As such, providing opportunity for a dynamic range of movement and action to unfold, specifically in relation to any child's given stage of development, is of the utmost importance during the absorbent mind period. Further breaking down movement, Montessori partitions the area of physical development during the first 6 years of life into two quote-unquote lines of development, represented by the upper and lower limbs respectively. Limbs which develop as two independent sets with two wholly different purposes. While our legs and feet largely serve us all in the same way to be mobile, the hand is seen by Montessori as a direct extension of the mind, acting as a quote-unquote spiritual tool. As she highlights, over the course of humanity, our feet have permitted us to roam the earth, while our hands are the builders of our civilizations and our works of creation upon the earth. As adults, we know the hand to be special. It acts as an outlet for our unique interests and skills. And in the early years child, when we observe keenly, we see that the hand is a primary source of sensory learning. For the child under 6, the best way of working is with the hands. Exploring and looking at the world primarily through their hands is how they uncover it. So providing children with opportunities to use, develop and learn with their hands in a wealth of ways on real objects and within real life activity, these are important upper limb considerations. Activities such as laying tables, folding sheets, packing and organising, everyday activities. And of course, using toys and educational materials that are stimulating for the hands and really work the hands in dynamic ways. Again, these are the important upper limb considerations. Regarding the second line of development, those lower limbs, providing children with opportunities to continually develop coordination and balance and exert themselves through climbing, play, walking, running, jumping. These are the important lower limb considerations. Ultimately, both lines of development bring us back again to movement and action as crucial contributors to the healthy formation of psychological organs, specifically within the child's absorbent mind. Together, language and movement provide the basic tools for environmental integration and exploration. And this is fueled by what Montessori refers to as horme, an ancient Greek word that personifies energetic activity, impulse or effort to do a thing. Sound much like a small child? Exactly. Well, it's a child's horme that gives rise to a progressive and continued quest for independence, a quest that is given the utmost respect within the Montessori method. Montessori herself, fixed on natural law, observes that steadily becoming independent is not only natural to a normally developing baby and toddler, but also, in light of constructivism over the planes of development, independence is fundamental to the rate and quality of a baby or child's ongoing development. Independence is the gateway to the sensory experience that the absorbent mind thirsts for. It is only upon the shoulders of independence a child can then exert his will and naturally develop and embody the power of concentration. According to Montessori, concentration is like the portal for pure and absolute absorption. Concentration during sensory experience seemingly maximizes the transfer of information, amplifying a child's ability to learn and grow naturally and rapidly. From the earliest moments after birth and continuously thereafter, the holistic environment of a child, which includes any and every person within that environment, may work to aid or hinder the natural development of both independence and concentration. Healthy and normal development of a child brings with it the steady unfolding of progressive independence and concentration, whilst any fears or anxieties of the outer world might dampen or even temporarily extinguish a child's quest for independence and ability to concentrate. This factor of environmental impact begins from the first breath of a newborn baby. In this very moment and every moment thereafter, we should strive to make this all-encompassing environment as inviting and sensorially stimulating as possible, We should be observant and mindful of a child's interaction with the environment, seeing a natural and progressive quest for independence and ability to focus. To this extent, as adults who are inherently a part of this all-encompassing environment, we should be vigilant in regards to our personal conduct with and around that sensitive and delicate child, avoiding violence and being a source of love, inspiration and support as we follow their development. And so, at its core, the Montessori method features a three-part system: the child, the environment, the teacher, or parent. The first is the child, the source and centre of the absorbent mind, this sensitive, unique being around which all the attention is placed. A being who naturally grows in strength, ability, coordination and communication to the point when he has obtained a will of his own and an ability to concentrate on the things that interest him at any given time, fueling his own learning. A being in need of order and with an innate desire to grow and educate himself, to learn for learning's sake. Second is the environment, this umbrella term that includes everything constituting the child's outer world. The environment is what the child absorbs, constructing himself in its likeness. According to Montessori, the environment and all that it contains, be it in the home or classroom, should be immaculate and inviting. Clean, tidy, emotionally stable, well-ordered, physically stimulating, and built as a world customised to the child's size and ability. Accessible and safe for the child to explore freely, interact with, and absorb. And finally, the teacher and/or parent. Unlike traditional perspectives on education, the adult within the Montessori method is not front and centre. They are not enforcers of learning, but rather a facilitator to productive experience, led to by the child. As teachers or parents to children, we should always be observing and noticing if and when, quote unquote, a child is not there yet. We should be proactive in fine-tuning and evolving the environment so as to support and encourage the next development milestones. Then, within carefully considered limits, we should provide absolute freedom for that child to explore his environment. And whenever concentration ensues, we should never interfere or interrupt, not even in the most subtle of ways, such as noticeably watching that child. We should aim for a fine balance between tactful intervention to set them on course, and then completely letting go when they are in a state of flow, modelling with precision as much as possible, and praising their work with all our hearts whenever a child seeks recognition. It is when we find a consistent and naturally harmonious relationship between these three components, the child, the environment and the adult, that the child will then flourish in the most wonderful of ways. With such an immense potential for shaping their minds during the first formative 6 years, that period of the absorbent mind, we should place the utmost importance upon ourselves, individually and collectively, to get it right. We must move beyond rigid and dated practices and perspectives of the past and provide a more dynamic and nourishing absorption in the present moment, so that our children may blossom and become the quote-unquote promise and hope for humanity's future. Closing quotation. The love we find in infancy shows what kind of love should reign ideally in the grown-up world. A love able of its own nature to inspire sacrifice. The dedication of one ego to another, of oneself to the service of others. In the depth of their love, all parents renounce their own lives to dedicate them to the children. And this devotion is natural to them. It gives them joy and does not feel sacrificial. No one ever says, "Look at that unfortunate man. He has 2 children." End of quotation. End of summary.